So my name is Adil, as you know already by now. So I'm going to let's keep it very casual because it's just us, you know. So if at any point you have questions, doubts, confusions, assertions, you want to beat me up, just tell me to stop, and I will present myself to you. So the title of this talk is Diorama: The Theatricality of Perspective, and this is basically the research that I'm doing, and this is the kind of context of the work that I've been doing for the last, let's say, 10 years. So I will show you snippets of what I've been doing here and there in different universities and different offices there. And let's see if we can make some sense out of it. So I will give you a set of indexes to characterize each project. And then of course they're overlapping, they're mixing in and out of each other. The projects, of course, because they're coming from me, from my teaching, etc., there are connections in between them, and then we can discuss them on whatever context you would like to discuss them. So just to kind of set the stage for this, I wanted to put these two pictures, which are in my reading, two different ways of seeing, two different optical devices. So on the right side, you see National Geographic, which is the camera. So this is the truth, the eye of truth. And on the left side, we have the image of the black hole. So the reason why I think they are completely at odds with each other is because one is a synthetic image. One is an image that has been constructed, rationalized, thought about, talking about, etc., etc. And the other one is purely the idea of truth and the idea of purveyors of truth. So this I find very interesting, the difference between the telescope or the microscope versus the camera itself, because with the camera, there's always the ground truth to look at. So it's always comparative, you know, it's always meant to be held as the reality. But on the other side, then we have something that we have never experienced before. We have no idea what a thing looks like. You know, so it's very interesting the way they constructed this image. So this is the latest imaging of a black hole that came out, I think, a couple of years ago. And the way they made it is because they have multiple telescopes around the planet, and then they construct partial pictures out of it. And then they try to mix it together by looking at what it means to look at something, what it means for something to be a thing, you know. So it went that essential into our into the way we operate. So they had pictures of plants, of animals. They basically took every image they could find of anything, and then somehow through that they managed to stitch together the multiple interpretations that they could find through these multiple telescopes. And then, of course, it's blurred out because it is an approximation of all of these images. And therefore, we have something that we can call a black hole. You know, now we have a stand-in for that. So this is my primary interest, how we look at things, how today we are relearning how to see, how today in the flood of images, what does it mean to take a picture? What does it mean to image something? You know, and then of course, this is coming from my interest in architectural rendering and architecture modeling, what kind of documents we produce, what kind of documents we produce to talk amongst ourselves, what kind of documents we produce to address to clients, et cetera, et cetera. So this is why the idea of a diorama is very, very interesting to me. So this is roughly 20 years before the birth of the camera. So this is before we learned how to seal an image and save it. You know, so what they were doing. So this is done by Daguerre and Bouton. Daguerre is one of the inventors of photography. So the guy who invented it. You know, and then there's a painter. And what it literally means is that a diorama is a crystalline linen surface through which you can see light and you can also shoot light on it. So it both reflects and refracts light. So these were set up as huge spectacles. They were going to London and then producing interiors of cathedrals in Paris. And then they would set up these huge spectacles, and then this was the kind of cinema of the time. And it's very interesting because this time before suddenly we found out how to fix images, there were plenty of these kind of mechanisms. So there were extremely hacky ways of trying to fix an image, extremely hacky ways of trying to tell a story with something that has been captured, et cetera, et cetera. So it's, I think we are at a similar moment today where we're relearning how to see. You know, we are constructing a new basis of how to look at things at all. So this linen crystalline surface, this is painted on both sides and always lit in the light of the sun. So it's always moving according to the weathers around. And then the painting on the back side is supposed to block light in certain areas. The painting in the front is supposed to show the image of that. And then you see this guy on the side. He's turning it based on the movement of the sun or the clouds, and then he can also pick up a lantern and then light it up, etc., etc. So there's a complex mechanics of how this is happening. So today, when we look at dioramas, we find them in natural history museums. So this I see as as taking the diorama as a camera to fix an idea of something. So how you see it as is there are images of certain ecosystems that are then explicated in museums to be seen by people and taken as the real. But the way I would like to look at it is through this work by Duchamp. This is called Itadone, which means the given. And this is done roughly 100 years after the diorama came. And this is an installation that he was working on, I think, roughly 20 years during the last 20 years of his life. So he had given up on art. He had retired as an artist and then devoted his life to playing chess. And of course, at that time, he was extremely interested in quantum mechanics, extremely interested in the mathematics of the time, etc. And then he constructed this. So the interesting thing about it is that there is now it's currently in Philadelphia, I think the Museum of Art, because it was built in his apartment, and then now it has been transported and reassembled in a museum, and you can only see that through a keyhole. So there are two huge Spanish style wooden doors, and there's a keyhole inside it through which you're supposed to see it. Another interesting thing is that it's completely fake. So along with this installation, there was a book that was left over by Duchamp, which was called the Manual of Instructions. So you see it here. You have extremely detailed descriptions of how to place the model, how to put the shrubbery around it, how to light the candle behind, how to light the landscape, etc., etc. All the kind of atmospherics here are extremely detailed, are explained in extreme detail. But what's also interesting is that when you look at how it's, there are a set of 15 operations as well, I think, yeah. So here you see 15 operations. It's one page, and this describes clearly how to put this thing together. So there are no suggestions as to what this is or why this is, but it's just like a deadpan instruction manual. And then you're like, this sounds a lot like IKEA. Huh? Like, why would Duchamp do this? This seems preposterous and kind of stupid, frankly. But then you realize that it's the way the instructions describe how to put it together and the way it has been documented in this folio, that is precisely not the way it was put together. So it's a separate construction of a new story about how these things were put together. And of course, he calls it demountable approximation. So it's I consider this very much like this black hole image that we saw. It's these multiple images that suddenly coalesce into a thing, but it can have many other renderings. So this is a moment in time where it has become crystallized in one way or the other. And then another thing, what is interesting about this manual is So suddenly it's not about the truth of how we construct things, but a construction of a story about how we construct things. So suddenly, if we think of architectural documents or the documents that architects produce, like we don't build buildings, huh? So our connection to buildings is not one-to-one. It's through the construction of a document that can communicate certain ideas to someone else or something else. Let's not be very clear there. So this is very interesting that the act of architecture is not construction. It's storytelling about how we make things. So then this kind of interest in what is the position of the observer, what is being observed, how are things put into proportion, how do you tell a story, how do you play things on stage? This comes to ideas of perspective that were developed in the 15th century, roughly, and before that there were other kinds of geometries, and then in the 15th century, this is the single point perspective. Suddenly, things can be put in a certain stage. They can be choreographed, and they can play by producing certain characters. So these are the indexes I'm talking about. Before every project, I will show you 3 words, and then you can connect them however you like, and there will be many more of those. So this is one of the most beautiful examples of what such a thing could be like. And it's very interesting. So throughout the treatises coming out of the Renaissance, almost every single one of them, or even before that, even Vitruvius, they're always talking about the theater in one way or the other, because this is the precise way how you tell stories. There's no television, no nothing. So you have to tell stories through that. And then this idea of perspective, or how you put things into proportion, this is always explicated through the mechanics of a theater. So this is the Olympic theater done by Mr. Palladio, but then he died before it actually was built. And then there was Scamozzi, who actually executed the whole thing. Let's see a small video about that. I just find it a bit hilarious, the guy who's presenting it, so I'm going to show it anyway. But then see the kind of mechanics that are at play here. Is there a sound? How come?
You are muted.
You're muted. Yeah.
If you go up again, the top box, you are muted.
Yeah.
The architecture, the perspective, the actor.
So whatever this guy says, just ignore it. But his voice and the way he acts is very.
And the audience are all partners in the magic of the moment. Lighting is also a key player in creating the illusion. Although lit today with 20th century lights, the entire theater was originally lit by flames from glass and metal oil lamps. The lamps were placed on hooks and small brackets throughout the scenery.
Early 90s.
Tucked away and hidden in slits and alcoves, simulating doors and windows, providing highlights and shadows, and the illusion of reality and depth. Sheets of tin were placed behind the lamps for protection. Given the flimsiness of construction, hundreds of lamps lit the theater during performance. They spread into all parts of the theater. On the proscenium, the colonnade and gallery surrounding the audience, and throughout the entire backstage area. Like a box filled with flickering flames. Is is a masterpiece of make-believe.
I love this guy. But this is a very nice series. So it's called The Empire of the Eye. I don't know. I think PBS produced it, but it's very, very nice. Yeah, but then it really begs the question, like, why put so much effort into creating a stage set when every story that will be told there is different? And then it really, so then the context becomes very important. Huh? So this is the first indoor theater ever built. So this is the first kind of move from the outside to the interior. It's completely closed. You can't see anything else. And then suddenly you have the vision of the Renaissance city. So the modern city is suddenly the backdrop for every story that is supposed to be told there. I think the first play that was performed there was Oedipus Rex, a Greek tale. And then suddenly this story is happening within the Renaissance city. So this is I think what perspective does. It takes all the stories from all times, and suddenly you can put it on stage and they can play and they can tell new stories within new contexts. So it's in multiple manners. It changes. It constructs new stories as it goes along. So the stage is not innocent. It is a scene in itself. So this is what it looks like. Of course, also like Duchamp's thing, completely fake, completely a mess. When you look at it in plan, it's the expression of the idea of one-point perspective, and then you get every single person out of these seven facades. Every person sitting here, they get an angle of the city of today, of a city of the Renaissance. And extremely crazy mechanics everywhere. Okay, but then what do stages look like today? Let's watch another nice video. This is I wish all the videos I showed were by this guy, but they're not. So do you guys know Mandalorian? Yeah. So this is the Star Wars offshoot. And then it's done by Industrial Light and Magic, which is the place if you want to look for VFX, etc. And then this is how they shoot Mandalorian.
Part of what's been fun about collaborating on The Mandalorian with Lucasfilm and Disney is that we have been able to see through a few technical innovations and a few firsts that I think are going to have a lot of impact. Wall technology coming together to create a backdrop for the big, beautiful world of Star Wars.
The volume is 21 feet tall, it's 75 feet in diameter, run by 7 machines, pumping the visuals onto the screen that's been created in pre-production and can be on the screen within 24 hours of being finaled.
It's incredibly impressive when you first walk out there because it completely surrounds your peripheral vision. And you really quickly forget that you're indoors and you're not out on some planet's surface. It feels like a real three-dimensional environment surrounding you because it is a three-dimensional.
It's not just do green screen.
Unreal Engine for virtual production. That's one of the
extraordinary number of benefits and advantages for shooting in that environment. It's mind-blowing what that tool is.
And you know what they say, why they did that? So they were using green screens before, as everyone else. But then they did that because this Mandalorian guy, the armor he wears, it's very reflective. So they were getting bleeding of green everywhere. So then they were like, let's kill the green screen altogether and let's make this huge volume. But then the thing is, so this really becomes a pure infrastructure, so this is any space. This can be anything you want. This can do whatever you want, as opposed to the Renaissance theater where suddenly it's extremely alive and extremely vivid in how it stages things. This thing is sitting there silently. So it's at the level of pure infrastructure. Let's see if there are more kind of movements in and out between these two poles. So one guy I like a lot, which is Peter Greenaway, and the way the interiors in his movies work is extremely loaded. They have the power to affect characters. They have the power to change situations. They have the capacity to anger someone. They have the capacity to cool down someone. And I like very much this particular sequence where one temperament moves into another, and the shift of characters in between them. I have a lot of videos. It's a fun lecture. Enough. Yeah, but then you see there are these movements in and out between these multiple spectrums, and then within the spectrum. And then you see then, so especially in the way how movie makers, how game designers use architecture or deploy architecture and make it talk, it's much more free than what you find with architects, because we're like, oh, we're working with Frank Lloyd Wright. We need to know everything about this guy. We can't deal with anything he has to say because we can't touch this. It's too precious. It's like you have to put it in a thing and then forget about it, wrap it in gold maybe, but not really, because Frank Lloyd Wright would hate it, something like that. And then you see, for example, the Ennis house. It's another example for a stage for me, because the way you see it being deployed in movies and in various TV series. See, Michael Douglas is sitting here. I don't know which one this is. Westworld, and look at so they've located it here now in the middle of a desert. Then again, Westworld. Some funny movie, I can't remember its name. Blade Runner, of course, the most explicit example of that. Deckard is going here and there. Vincent Price's horror shows were there as well. I always forget the name of this, Gore Light or something, something like that. Game of Thrones. But the thing is, it's not an any stage, it's not pure infrastructure, because there is a certain character there. There is an invariance to this house that is being built on by many of these characterizations. So these characters move in and give it a different color, but there is still something there, there is a character there. So it's neither clearly defined, clearly set, nor is it completely flexible. Or Blade Runner, Westworld, Ricky Martin. And then you see there is this kind of, if we start characterizing what it is that this space has, it houses villains of sorts. It houses megalomaniacs of sorts. It houses these kind of characters. Like it's in Club Silencio, David Lynch takes the wall and pushes it inside an apartment building. Then this was in Star Wars, I think. Not Star Wars, Star Trek, one of these movies. That this was the house of a villain inside it. Okay, another set of three now. Okay, how to start navigating what we have today. So today you can find any model, any kind of texture, any kind of geometry that you want. You can find it on Sketchfab, you can find it on TurboSquid, you can find it on these millions of websites. You say a chair with pumpkin feet, you will find something there. Maybe you find a pumpkin that's sitting on a chair, but same thing. It doesn't take much to go from there. And then you see this, so how to begin dealing with these things that we found, that are available all along, and how to start characterizing it. So I like this photographer very much, Hiroshi Suzuki. And what he did was he went to, I think, the Henry Poincaré Institute, where they had these sculptures of mathematical forms. So these are Gaussian curves, and they made sculptures of this. And then it's interesting that these geometries are not the ones that talk immediately. These are things that we can find all around, and that perhaps it's our job not to make new geometries, but to bring geometries into a certain play. So he takes these objects that are extremely abstract, that purely illustrate something, and then he characterizes them. He stages them, he lights them up in a certain way and puts them up on stage. Suddenly you see something emerging that was not there. And it's very much like this with these models that we find on Sketchfab. We have to take them, but we have to imbue them with some stories. And then again with this bloody Blade Runner. Huh? So you see all these objects that are around the characters. So these are the glasses that Deckard uses. This is the lamp that is on his desk. This is the lamp that is on, what's her name, Rachel's reading table. This is where Deckard sleeps and drinks and does other things. Yeah, let's not go there. And this is Rachel's chair. So suddenly these things become, through their connections to other things, they start getting a characteristic quality. There is something on the chat. Great comment. So another set of 3: scale, resolution, dimension. So you guys probably all know this Eames powers of 10. Huh? So it's the smooth motion from the microscopic to the telescopic, and it's extremely. It's done in one shot. Let's call it that, and things move in and out of each other.
But it's in both directions, no?
Yeah. So it starts with the couple lying in the park, and then it goes up, and then it goes back down, or the other way around.
It's one shot.
What if we turn this thing around? What if we start thinking that the idea of scale is something discrete, that multiple objects could be found within different scales? If you put a microscope here, then this thing is unrecognizable from what it is to be me. So there are different scales of, yeah.
And if we are on the level of physics, the physics of the atom is completely different than the physics of the planet, and it's completely different than the physics of the universe. So there is no continuity between these three physics: the quantum, the Newton physics, and the relativity. There are different laws, different behaviors, and these guys put it in one line.
And then this is funny for me. This game is kind of an illustration of that. This was done by Jonathan Blow. So it's basically it's really not a game per se. You don't do much except walk around. Walk around is what.
When you came into this world, there gradually arose into being the sensation of I. And you feel that you are I just as much as I feel that I am I. But all the time, everywhere, there are other I's starting up. Whether they be human, animal, anything you like. They be in other galaxies, etc. Always, they're starting up. And so the feeling that we call I is how everything feels on the inside. You can get a certain vision of life where everything is seen to be a complex pattern of rhythm.
dances. The human dance, the flower dance, the bee dance, the giraffe dance. And that's what this all is, it's jazz.
They're all slightly
This is a
epileptic.
big jazz, this world.
Slightly.
And what it's trying to do is to see how jazzed up it can get. How far out this play of rhythm can go.
Yeah, but it's very beautiful because the narration is beautiful. It's composed out of many books about nature, and then this guy's just reading it while you play as a planet, or as a cow, or as a microbe, or as a tree. It doesn't matter, or as an island. So these kind of discrete moments within the scale, this becomes an interesting thing. So this is also, in terms of talking about scale, this guy I like very much, Franz Klein, a painter who was doing these kind of abstract paintings, and it was unclear what he's about. Is it really in the realm of this Ad Reinhardt, etc., who are talking about purely the paint, or what is that? Then it turns out these are close-ups of certain objects. So this would be, for example, a corner of a chair, or a leg here, or the side of a building. And these paintings are huge, massive paintings. And then suddenly they acquire a different quality. So this is really at the level of discretizing a certain scale, and these are, so I'm showing you all of these in a very visual manner, but of course this goes into many levels, like the scale of a conversation, the scale of a particular thought, or anything like that. So it works on multiple levels of abstraction. So then these are a few experiments that I was doing with students of mine. So we were scanning things, a lot of them. So we were 3D scanning them. And then the funny thing is, the minute you roll the mouse, it dissolves. The scan dissolves into a cloud of points. The scan dissolves into overlapped meshes that don't look like anything. How to start producing a discreteness there, and how to start telling stories about it. So what we were doing is scanning objects, bringing them into a CAD software, and then getting to a scale where we could start introducing architectural conventions. For example, the idea of a section, the idea of a dashed line. How can this offset the figures? How can they offset the reality of the objects that were present? So this is actually a cactus that was scanned. So another game towards this idea of bringing a new resolution to a certain image. This was a project that I did with Elena Manfredini, where we took the whole skyline of Chicago and started introducing details in places that didn't have any details. By that we filled up the whole skyline with connections which are discrete, and then suddenly you see there's a new skyline of Chicago emerging with a completely different resolution to it. So instead of the real resolution of the image, we were working with an interpreted and synthesized scale for it. Another such example, this was at the Stateoftheart. We did the same thing. So we scanned a few things, and then we started introducing compositional ideas. So what would be an architectural drawing if we were talking about pixelation? What would be an architectural drawing if we were talking about camouflage? What would be an architectural drawing if we were talking about overlapping volumes? What would be an architectural drawing if we were talking about contiguous relationships, etc., etc.? And then these things start to emerge, and it's not clear which scale they're playing at. So it could be an extreme zoom in or an extremely distanced view to things. But in these ones, it's more towards the extreme zoom in. So they stretch out to the edges of the canvas, which makes you think this is more like a field condition rather than an object like the stage. So this is the other side of these drawings. So once we did these drawings, we thought of reversing the process. And what if instead of the scanned object, now with the new ways of drawing these things, can we reproduce a certain object through that? So then this results in these kind of, so you see this one relates to this one, which one, this one relates to this one, and so on. So it's a complete reversal of this idea of documentation. So you affect the thing by documenting it, and then you can reverse the thing, and then you get new things out into the world. Yeah, and then of course you can 3D print them and then throw them at each other or take nice pictures of them, you know. You can make an exhibition out of them, which is also very nice. We made it an archaeological exhibition, and then we handed everyone a big torch, and then they could go and see these see these. But we had to have torches because there was no light there. So it was more a necessity than it worked out, I think. Yeah, and then of course, then you can take these objects and put them back on a different scale, and then you can produce a whole island out of them. You can produce a whole whole world out of them. Yeah, so I mean, this is all this idea of multiple resolutions, multiple scales, discretized, playing a certain role in the many connections they make. Style, character, posture, another set of three. So like this Sujimoto guy, Man Ray was very similar. So somehow it's very nice that these famous artists from all times are always somehow interested in the mathematics of the time, in the physics of the time, in the state of the art technology of the time, and then they try to somehow accommodate that within the work. So it's never really, it's this idea of the artist who's like and sitting in a cupboard and then painting some shit that nobody cares about. I don't think it really exists, because they're making insane amounts of connections with all the things that are going around, all the things that are happening in our times. You see the same thing with Hearst, with what's his name, with Koons, etc. All of these guys, with Michelangelo, with Raphael. It's always somehow entrenched within the time, and then they're making connections that make us see things. So then, like this Sujimoto, Man Ray took, he also went to another exhibit of these mathematical models, and then he did a project that he titled Shakespearean Equations. So he really took these illustrations of mathematical functions and played them and put them on stage. So for example, this is, I was joking earlier when I said it, but this is actually Julius Caesar. Right? The cut head with the smooth curve. That's what he called Julius Caesar. And then there's Midsummer Night's Dream. There's I don't know. There's Hamlet as well. Probably this one, etc., etc. So this act of naming it gives it a character immediately, because suddenly you are making a connection to it that wasn't there before, and then both of these things are affected by it. So on the side of posture, this was also another project. So we had 33 students, and we had to propose an intervention for an island in Venice. So what we did was we assigned each student a particular building, and then they had to recompose it and compose it in a way that we could talk about postures and characters through them. Because this whole platform, it houses all the characters that are embedded within the island, all the stories that are embedded within the island, and then they do a bal mask around it. So it's really a ritualistic thing. And then, of course, above these postured objects, then there's a layer of style. So this adds on to the character. So these things overlap constantly. Yeah, this was actually a competition proposal, and we didn't get anything in it, sadly, because they had, so it was very loose, the requirements they had, but they had one strong requirement, which was that you cannot build outside the island. So I'll just let it sink in there. And then we were like, yeah, why didn't you give us a prize, man? Come on. Peter Cook was in the jury. Still nothing. Yeah, and on a similar scale, then this becomes more about the combination of certain objects, bringing them together to tell a story, texturing them, styling them, so they have a body, they have some sort of a character to them, and then of course producing then different scales of it. So this was in the Ruhrgebiet, which is the industrial area in Germany, where all the coal industry used to be, the metal used to be, et cetera, et cetera. And then I went there once, and then I saw it written there that it's called industrial nature. So this clump of this mass of pipes and greenery, they just completely engulf the whole area, and nothing is differentiable. So then here we really thought, okay, let's pick up the many things lying around, and let's try to see if we can make certain figures out of it, certain objects out of it, certain objects that can offset this kind of smoothness of the landscape. And then these resolve themselves into kind of typical compositions in a way, because you see it's very circular. So out of the 6 projects coming out, they were all circular, because that would be the easiest kind of way to make a thing out of it, So on multiple levels, these compositional ideas have to work to produce a thing. So just a side note on this idea of games, tools, and toys. So I think what's very important, especially today, is that we should stop specializing in tools, because there's too many of them, and they're too good at what they do. Basically. So I think it's important to step outside of that, because then you saw, I think, the last 10 years or so you see so many buildings that you can look at them and you can say, yeah, that was done by Grasshopper. What is that, right? Suddenly these tools become so strong that they have the ability to dictate what you want to do. So this being exhausted and consumed by the tool, I think it's important to navigate outside of that. And for me, the best way to do it, for now at least, is to be able to use many of them. So if you have like 20 tools, they become more like toys in your hands. You can play with them however you want. You can use them for what they're good for, and you can use them for what they're not good for. I like Blender very much, and I hate AutoCAD, because with one you can do anything, and with the other you have to do precisely one thing. So they offset all ideas of scale, and they fix it to an idea of architectural drawings that comes from the 15th century. I refuse to participate.
But it's the same with a book, or not? When you are reading only one book, you have only one theory. When you're reading 2 books, maybe you can mix a little bit of different theories, or what you have learned from the different books. With 3 books, etc. I think it's.
Yeah, and so with words and books, it's just that they live outside the realm of vision. So I think it's the opposite side with drawings. So they have a part which is completely visual. So with books, they already live in a cloud in our heads. So
the question is, when you have 10,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's that?
These techniques, we can actually do these things now like this. Huh?
So this is when I had 52,000 models. How do you navigate through them? So then this is a self-organizing map. It starts to categorize them not based on their semantic label. So this would be, for example, calling it a table, a chair, this, that, I don't know, the wall, etc. But then starting to produce affinities within certain neighborhoods. So you see, these zones, I don't have a zoom in, but for example, the stools and some chairs, they start collecting hair, the sideboards start collecting hair, etc., etc. But then they have local consistencies that are still connected to the larger web of the map. And then this I deployed with some of my students. So what you could do with this map, so this is 52,000 models, but represented through 10,000 of 10,000 units. So it's 100 by 100. And what you could do is you can click on one, and you can select all the ones that are behind it. And then you can start composing them because they are of a single kind,
some kind of family.
Yeah, so they belong to a single family, and then you can introduce objects from the other side and introduce a new family into the household, something like that. So then you start making neighborhoods out of that. So these were the kind of results we got from it. So these are different families that produce certain collages. So these are kit bashed completely, but then they have to become characteristic somehow. They have to be able to you have to be able to tell if they have a posture, if they have a style, if they wink at you or not. These kind of ideas, and then together they can be composed into a whole, which can be addressed by using architectural conventions. For example, the section here, suddenly we're in the realm where we're not really talking about the objects themselves only, but talking about what it means to cut a section. Does it mean that we start revealing the mass to void ratios, or does it mean we're talking about part to whole ratios, etc., etc.? So these things start becoming apparent. And then we have atmospheric renderings from the interior as well. So this is again the same idea of the scale. And these models are separately composed. They are not coming from the same thing. And it's important that they are like that, because it's not the truth of a fully composed 3D model, but multiple stories that can construct many new objects. So another set of three, is it getting, yeah, it's, okay. So this idea of mimics, fakes, and copies. So one story that I like very much is this writer Bulgakov. No, sorry, Nabokov. Yeah. Towards the end of his life, this guy was just looking at butterflies. And then he even discovered a few, and then he was naming them. So he became a real ornithologist towards the end of his life. But then what he realized, so he was studying the patterns on the wings of butterflies. And before he came along, the theory was generally accepted that they only do that to mimic certain things to protect themselves from predators, so they can hide. But then it turned out that there are many butterflies that have patterns that are unexplained by their context, that are unexplained by their this prey versus predator mode, but that they were there just for being there. So they might have started off as a mimicry of what was going on there, but then it evolved or changed into something completely different. So it actually was making them stand out from their context rather than sink in. He also tells the story of a caterpillar that was extremely skilled at disguising itself with a certain flower. So it would always be there, but the colors it would produce were of the wrong season. So it was always somehow mimicking the wrong season of when the flower was growing. So it's outside, it's explained outside the idea of fitness, and that these things spill over, there is no perfect copy of anything. So these things start to spill over and they produce a new game. So this I like very much. This is Jeff Wall, the same kind of, not the same time, but the same class of these artists. So he built this, it's a diorama. Of course, that's what he called it. And initially it's really just, I did not get it. But then it turns out this is an exact replica of this painting. So all he did was he proxied all the characters that are present there, and then introduce introduce his studio, because this is how he sees it. suddenly through this connection, it transforms it into another story altogether. Maybe I'll skip that. Okay. So another set of 3. So again, with as we saw with the kind of geometries that are available around, how to deal with materials and textures, because we see all of them. But what becomes very interesting that today we can have metal that shines like glass. We can have plastic that reflects like another kind of plastic. We can have aluminum that can pretend to be brick. And this building I like very much. I'll just show it quickly. So I have 2 examples, actually both from Switzerland somehow. So this is a museum in Basel. The whole facade is made out of stone. Yeah, this is the close-up of the facade. Yeah, it's a completely solid, almost medieval fortress-like building. But then you see what happens when this material is put into motion. Yeah, so this moment I like very much, when suddenly we can have screens made out of stone. So it's not just any material, but it's a material that can play another one. Suddenly these things become extremely interesting. So it's an electric materiality. And then there's one more building that I recently discovered, was actually in Zurich. So this is by Wiel Aritz. It's slightly outside Zurich, near Glatsch. It's a very strange building, because you go up close to it and it looks cheap.
Is it the render?
No. This is the real.
Curtains or the real image?
These are curtains, and this is the stone, and this is a printed stone. So the requirement for this whole area was that the facade has to be stone. So what these guys did, which is ingenious, is that they took the best stone in the world, which was in Mises Barcelona pavilion. So they took an image of the stone and they just printed it on top. I mean, this is really beautiful, huh? That you can play materials in such an interesting manner. Like what kind of gold do you want? I want the gold that was that made the chain around Cleopatra's neck. That's the kind of games that we can play now.
I want to sing.
Another short video with another set of 3. Let me show you that. It's ending very soon. I see some people dozing off. Wake up. Sorry, I pointed in the general direction. I apologize. No sleeping. Get some coffee.
I have coffee.
This is a beautiful movie that Miro showed it to me, and then I just fell in love with it, because so it kind of compresses all these ideas of fakeness, of constructing something, of things that are not ashamed to be artificial, but rather are proud of, and how they are accommodated around certain rituals, and how they become completely part and parcel of how things work. So this is a character who has to throw a party for Louis XIV, the ritual king. And just see how they're constructing the space around the particular rituals that are supposed to happen. And he enters. again. Yeah, I just wanted to characterize the studio through that, because it's very, very close. We just do it digitally. So we enact these rituals, we construct these rituals, and then we construct sceneries around them. And they're inherently fake. They're inherently artificial. They are proud to be synthetic rather than natural. So it's amongst all of these things. So now we're in the 6th season of the studio. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have introduced them a little bit, but then we always try to deal with global problems and construct the idea of an architect as somebody who's grounded within the global climate of sorts. And then you have to make architecture. You have to articulate certain arguments. You have to put things into perspective, etc. So the first one was towards dealing with nature and recycling beyond the cliches of sustainability. The second one was towards the lack of free speech in today's cities, and how to produce certain spaces that could provide a generous space where these talks could be had. The third one, how architecture gives power a face. So we chose the character of Elizabeth Murdoch, which is the here is to be of Rupert Murdoch, who is a billionaire and who owns Fox News, etc. So it's a big character in the world today. Alienations, how to address the idea of cultural heritage, and how to step out of not just preserving it, but talking to it and playing it. Engenderings, where we were dealing with xenofeminism, the Xenofeminist Manifesto, and we took Rem Koolhaas's Villa Le Mans in Bordeaux, and then we introduced Coco Chanel into this house, just to see what happens. And now it's Faces, where we're now in Brussels and we're dealing with 2 pop stars. Maybe I can show you a couple of projects. Yeah, I'll just go through it very, very quickly. So I think one project that I like very much, and of course, in the studio, as you probably know by now, we go through the same kind of cycle. So we write a text, we make a movie, we then construct a stage set for that, but it can also happen any other way, because it's cyclical. So everything is constantly moving until the last moment. So you're rewriting text based on the images, you're redoing the images based on the text, you're redoing the model, all in a parallel sense. And these are our 3 ways of telling stories about architecture, telling stories about characters in particular spaces, telling stories about temperaments. So this was an interesting project within our studio, because it's called Amorous Manifesto. And then you can go through perhaps perhaps a nice way would be to show the booklet of the amount of text that this guy wrote. So what he was trying to do was to introduce a family dynamics onto the site. And this is a very difficult family, and they're discussing love, or the idea of love, and they are it looks like a broken family at some times. It looks like a very lovely, happy-going family at some times, and then there's a set of characters all along the site that talk to the others in a certain manner. Yeah, I don't think I will get too much into detail with that, but then you see there are various ways of tactility, various sensations, various smells, various noises, etc., that somehow start to play these family dynamics on the site. I think I can show you the final renders of it. Yeah, so then Jonathan built this. There should be the full image somewhere as well, I believe. No. But you can see it here, huh? So we gave him the job to build something with Maison Bordeaux, but then he developed everything around it in order to tell a story about Maison Bordeaux. So nothing was done to the house, except that suddenly it was surrounded by characters that could talk to it and it could respond, you know? So there were conversations happening between all of these many characters. And the funny thing is that they all come from different worlds. So some come from Zaha even, some come from Hayduk, some
the learning center or something.
Which one?
It looks like completely in the middle, the rollers.
Yeah, this one, huh? Yeah. So they all come from different worlds, and then suddenly it's this extremely large family that has regrouped together, and then they start talking again. So this was an interesting take on our brief, because generally we are always doing buildings, you know, so buildings and interiors, and then trying to work out the facade, etc. But then in this one, it really became an urban project. Another one, very quickly, I will show you from season 4. One project that I like very much is Palais Ortolan. And in this season, we were talking about cultural heritage, and then we took the character of Lenny Belardo from the Young Pope, this TV show. So it's the new Pope is the youngest one, and he's American, you know, so that's never happened before. And then this guy moves into Ludwig Wittgenstein's house. So Villa Wittgenstein is there. So then we see how these two characters could talk to each other, because the house has a very particular character. It has its own presence. It has its own sense. It has its own ideas about the world. And then this kind of a character who's
so it's very similar setup like we have here. Huh? So you always have these characters who have the house and then how to play. And you can always refer to these projects and check a little bit how these guys do it. Now we changed a little bit, but the principal things are the same.
Yeah.
And then it's Jorge and me and Adil, we are working on this stuff, and we will continue developing them.
Yeah, and the thing is, so what's important to mention here is that it's not about precision in terms of media, you know, in a way. So it's not about learning the craft of making an image. It's really about taking many things and then learning how to talk with them. So it's really about all of these things. So we do text, we do images, we do videos, we do renderings, we do drawings, etc. All of these things all together. So if you want to become an expert in it, you can do it in your own time. But what we want to do is bring these media together and discuss them outside of virtuosity within a larger context. So let's see what kind of global questions can we talk about, can we put on the table through architecture. So we don't become like these people, you know, chiseling away at the corner of a building, but we remain architects that communicate certain ideas about the world through the buildings we make, through the characters we put on stage.
Does this resonate, for instance, with what you read for today with this Mandalorian book? I think what Adil, how you said it, yeah? For me, this is totally in sync with the book. So if you think about the book, how he talks about the knowledge, how he talks about how to transmit knowledge, what knowledge is about, what are the problems of content. So this is very, I mean, we are very inspired with this guy, and this is kind of, but you just said it now in so beautifully, you know?
Yeah, so this project is it's from this season, and then this is more like a person falling in love with Lenny Belardo, who has now become an alchemist cook of some sort. And then this, of course, there are various ways of characterizing the many spaces within the house. You see the veil, the primeval forest, the chamber of selection, the chamber of conservation, the chamber of dissolution. So all of these things, you can think of a restaurant. It's a way to characterize a restaurant, or the other way around. You know, it's a characterization that suggests a restaurant, something like that. And then I just found the renderings incredibly beautiful, and the text is just extremely long, so I won't read it for you. You can read it on your own time. But it's these narrations are done by setting these stages up. So it's always a connection between what you see, what you hear, and then you proportion it within a project. So this would be our idea of what a project is, something like that. Yeah, I think I'm done.